They tore my dress open in front of everyone, fingers clawing at the fabric like I was some animal they were stripping for inspection. Someone laughed, someone gasped, phones came out, flashes going off like it was a fashion show. Not my public execution. Gold digger, his mother sneered, yanking at my sleeve until it ripped. You thought you could fool us, didn't you? His sister giggled, loud enough for everyone to hear. Check everywhere. Girls like her will hide things anywhere they can. I stood there under the chandelier light, humiliated, shaking, clutching what was left of my dress to my chest while my in-laws circled me like vultures. My husband, no, the man I thought was my husband, stood frozen in the crowd, eyes on the floor, not defending me, not even looking at me. And what they didn't know, my father was watching everything. What they didn't know, they were about to find out exactly who I really was. Stay until the very end of this story, because the way my father destroyed them calmly, legally, and permanently will leave you speechless. Trust me, you don't want to miss what happens when the wrong family humiliates the wrong woman. Now, let me take you back to where it all began. My name is Lena Hay, and this is the story of how I learned that sometimes the people who should protect you are the ones who tear you apart, and sometimes justice doesn't show up quietly. Sometimes it arrives in a fleet of black cars with your father leading the charge. I wasn't born into the world the Hargroves worshipped, or at least, that's what they thought when I met Ethan Hargrove. I was just a 23-year-old scholarship student balancing 2 part-time jobs and full-time classes. At least, that's what everyone around us believed, including him. I worked in the campus library during the day and waited tables at night. My jeans were faded, my shoes were cheap, and my hair was always twisted into a messy bun because I never had time to do anything else. He met me on a Tuesday. I remember because it was raining, and I'd slipped on the marble floor in the business school lobby like some tragic scene in a rom-com. My laptop went skidding across the floor, my bag spilled, highlighters and pens rolling everywhere. I muttered a curse under my breath and scrambled to pick everything up before I was late to my economics midterm. Here, a low, amused voice said. A hand appeared in my line of vision, holding my notebook. I looked up and saw him, tall, sharp jawline, dark hair swept back like he'd just walked out of a magazine cover shoot. His shirt was the kind of perfectly crisp white that only came from dry cleaning, and his watch was worth more than my beat-up car. Thanks, I muttered, cheeks flushing as I took the notebook. You okay? He asked, brows lifting slightly. That was a pretty dramatic entrance. I'm fine, just my dignity that's bruised. He smiled then, slow and warm, the kind of smile that made you feel like you were the only person in the room. I'm Ethan. Lena, I said. I'd shake your hand, but I'm busy gathering the remains of my life. He chuckled. Let me help. He knelt without hesitation, collecting highlighters and handing them to me. A couple of students walked past us, whispering. I heard his name in their hushed voices. Hargrove. I knew the name. Everyone did. The Hargroves owned half the high-rises downtown. Old money, real estate empire, philanthropy, board positions. Ethan's father sat on the board of our university. His mother's charity events were always featured in glossy magazines. I'd seen their faces, all perfect and polished, in the news more times than I could count. He didn't belong on the floor of a university lobby, helping a nobody pick up pens. But there he was, and for a long time, I believed that moment said something about who he really was. We started as friends, study sessions that turned into late-night conversations, coffee walks after class, inside jokes. He'd show up to the diner where I worked, taking the booth in the back with his laptop, pretending to study just so he could be there until my shift ended. You look tired, he'd say, sliding a milkshake toward me when the place was slow. Sit, 5 minutes won't kill you. I need the tips. I'd protest, but I'd sit anyway, because being with him made the rest of it feel worth it. He never treated me like I was lesser. He never flinched at my cheap clothes or my old phone. He never commented on the way I always had to check my bank balance before saying yes to anything. Or maybe he noticed and thought it made him the hero in the story. Maybe he liked being the one who could swoop in. I didn't realize that part until much later. What he didn't know, what no one knew, was that I wasn't struggling because I had no choice. I was struggling because I'd chosen it. My real last name isn't Lena Parker, the one I enrolled in school with. It's Lena Hale. My father is Richard Hale, founder and CEO of Hale Dominion Group, a global investment conglomerate with its fingers in tech, banking, energy, and real estate. Net worth, just under $40 billion last time. I accidentally saw a financial article about him. I grew up in a world where every problem could be solved with a phone call, private jets, security details, homes in 3 countries, exclusive schools where the uniforms were tailored and the kids learned to pronounce, portfolio diversification before they were old enough to drive. And I hated it. Not the comfort, not the safety, not my father. I loved him more than anyone on this planet. I hated what money did to people. I watched so-called friends turn on him. The moment a deal didn't go their way, I watched women cling to his arm, eyes glittering not with love, but with calculation. At 11 years old, I watched a woman cry in our foyer, begging him not to end the relationship because she'd given him the best years of her life. He'd stood there, stone-faced, and quietly had security escort her out. At 12, I heard his lawyer explaining that a man I'd thought was an uncle had been embezzling from my father's company for years. At 13, I walked in on my father shredding letters from distant cousins asking for small help that somehow always equaled 6 figures. Money devoured everything around us. So when I turned 18, I made a decision that nearly broke his heart. "Dad," I'd said, sitting across from him at the long dining table that felt too big now that my mother was gone, "I want to go to university under a different name." He'd looked up from his laptop slowly, eyes narrowing. "What?" "I don't want to be Richard Hale's daughter there. I want to be just Lena. I want people to like me or hate me without calculating what they can get out of it. So I want to use Mom's maiden name, Parker." He'd leaned back, studying me with those sharp, assessing eyes that could dismantle CEOs in boardrooms. For a moment, I thought he'd refuse, then his expression softened. "You know this means no one will know you're my daughter," he said quietly. "No automatic connections, no safety net, no one to intimidate anyone who hurts you." "I know," I'd whispered. "That's kind of the point." He'd exhaled slowly, folding his hands together. For a long moment, he didn't speak. Then he said the words that would echo in my life years later. "If you ever truly need me, Lena." He looked me dead in the eyes. "Call no matter what time it is, no matter what the situation is. You are my line in the sand. Understand?" My throat had burned. "I understand." We changed my name legally, quietly through a small law firm in another state. My records at the university listed me as Lena Parker. My financial aid came from a trust that looked like a normal scholarship fund. My apartment was small, but nice. My part-time jobs were more about the experience than the paycheck. The world believed I was a girl from nowhere, making her way up. And I loved it until Ethan. He told me he loved me for the first time on a rooftop. We were sitting on the edge of the business building, legs dangling over the side, watching the city lights blink on one by one as the sun vanished behind the skyscrapers. "I've never met anyone like you," he'd said, voice soft. I snorted. "That's because you've been hanging out with girls who own more designer bags than books." He laughed. But there was a seriousness in his eyes when he looked at me. "I'm serious, Lena. They all want the same thing. The same parties. The same lifestyle. The same name, Hargrove." He said it like it was a weight. "They don't see me. They see the last name, the money, the inheritance. You're the only one who treats me like a person." "Maybe because I don't care about any of that," I replied. He smiled, like that was the most romantic thing he'd ever heard. "Say it again." I rolled my eyes. "I don't care about your money." He leaned in closer. "One more time. For my ego, I don't care about your money." He kissed me then, sudden and sure, his hand warm on the side of my neck, his thumb brushing my jaw. When he pulled back, he whispered against my lips, "I love you, Lena." My heart had pounded so hard I thought he could hear it. I love you too," I breathed. And I meant it. I didn't think about his last name. I didn't think about his parents. I didn't think about what it would mean to step into that world. I just saw the boy who brought me coffee, who walked me home at 1 a.m., who sat through my rambling rants before exams, who listened when I talked about my mum. I saw Ethan, not the Hargrove heir. That was my first mistake. We got married a year later. Not in some huge cathedral with crystal chandeliers and live choirs. Not with 500 guests and magazine spreads. We got married in a small garden behind a tiny stone chapel just outside the city. It was just us, a few of his friends from campus, and my Uncle Peter, a retired Halley security chief who'd known me since I was born and was currently playing the role of my only family who could make it. My father wasn't there, at least. That's what Ethan thought. In reality, my father watched the whole thing from a black SUV parked discreetly down the road, tinted windows hiding his identity. He refused to interfere. I'd chosen this path, but his hand had trembled when he signed the quiet pre-marriage agreement with his lawyers, ensuring that none of Ethan's family could ever touch the Hale fortune, not officially, not directly, not through marriage. I didn't know about that paperwork then. I didn't know how far he went to protect me. All I knew was that I was in love with a man who kissed me like I was his future and promised to stand by my side forever. When I said, "I do," I meant it with everything in me. I wish I could say the same for his family, that I met them properly for the first time at a Sunday brunch 2 weeks after our wedding, if you could call it a brunch, that it felt more like a silent trial. The Hargrove estate was exactly what you'd expect from old money. Sprawling lawns, white columns, heavy curtains, and family portraits staring down from the walls as if judging you for breathing their air. Ethan squeezed my hand as we walked up the steps. "Just be yourself," he whispered. "They'll love you once they get to know you." I had no idea that be yourself translated to be quiet and accept whatever they throw at you. His mother, Victoria Hargrove, met us at the door. She was beautiful in that polished, icy way that made you think of diamonds in a museum, expensive, perfect, and absolutely untouchable. Her blonde hair was swept into a chignon. Her pearl earrings glowed softly, and her eyes went from my face to my shoes in a split second, cataloging every flaw. "So," she said, lips curving into something that technically resembled a smile, but felt more like a threat, This is the girl. Mom, this is Lena, Ethan said, his voice bright, a little too upbeat. My wife. Her gaze flicked back to my face, and she extended a hand like she was granting an audience. Lena, she repeated, as if tasting the name. How cool. Dea took a hand and forced a smile, ignoring the insult. It's nice to finally meet you, Mrs. Hargrove. Victoria, she corrected. Mrs. Hargrove is my mother-in-law, and she's in a much nicer place than this. Come in. We don't like to keep the food waiting. Inside, his father, Charles Hargrove, barely looked up from the financial section of the newspaper when Ethan introduced us. He gave me a brief nod, then returned to his reading, as if my presence was about as consequential as the weather report. His younger sister, Chloe, was lounging on the white sofa, scrolling through her phone. She glanced up, gave me a once-over, and smiled a smile that was all teeth. Cute dress, she said. Vintage, thrift store, I answered honestly. Her smile sharpened. Of course, that was the start. The beginning of the slow erosion of my peace. It didn't. That happened all at once. That it was little things at first. Victoria asking me to help the staff after dinner while Chloe sipped wine with their friends. Charles speaking about investments and deals at the table, then pausing and saying, "Oh, I'm sorry, Lena, we're boring you with things beyond your understanding." Chloe inviting me to lunches with her socialite friends and then spending an hour talking about girls who trap rich men because they're too lazy to work for anything themselves. I tried to laugh it off. I tried to tell myself they were just old-fashioned, protective, unsure. I believed Ethan when he said, they just need time. They're used to a certain type of woman around here. What type? I'd asked, half joking. The kind who cares more about the Hargrove name than about me, he'd said, wrapping his arms around my waist. You're different. That's why I love you. Those words were enough to make me swallow my discomfort and keep trying. I brought Victoria thoughtful gifts. I complimented her decor, her charity work, her fashion. I listened to Charles talk about the market and asked questions so he'd feel respected. I helped Chloe pick outfits and even did her makeup once when her stylist cancelled. And still, I'd catch them looking at me like I was something they'd stepped on, like I was temporary, like I was an inconvenience they had to tolerate until Ethan came to his senses. Don't let them get to you, Ethan would say, kissing my forehead. We'll prove them wrong. We'll show them our love is real. I believed him. I wanted so badly for him to be right. I didn't tell my father everything. He knew they weren't welcoming from the little bits that slipped into my voice when we spoke, but he didn't know the full extent. Are they treating you well? He'd ask over the phone, his voice calm but edged with steel. Yes, I'd lie. They're adjusting. If anyone crosses a line, Lena, he'd always say, you call me. I don't care if it's 3 a.m. I don't care if you think it's not a big deal. If they hurt you, it's my business. I know, Dad, I'd say, my chest tight. I'm okay. Really, I wanted to handle it on my own. I wanted to be the girl who didn't need to run to her billionaire father every time life was hard. Looking back, I wish I'd called him sooner, because if I had, I might never have ended up in a ballroom half naked with 200 strangers, watching me break. Our second wedding anniversary was when everything shattered. Victoria insisted on hosting the party. It will be marvelous, she'd said, waving her hand dismissively when I suggested something small. People are curious about Ethan's wife. This is the perfect opportunity to show them that he's happy, that he's settled. Do we have to invite so many people? I'd asked cautiously. Wouldn't something intimate? She laughed, a sharp sound. Intimate, dear. In our world, intimacy is for scandal, not celebration. Relax. You only have to stand there and look grateful. The words had stung more than I let on, but Ethan had been so excited. Maybe this is her way of accepting you, he'd said, echoing the same naive hope he always had. She wants to show you off. Show me off. He had no idea how right he was. The night of the party, I stood in front of the tiny mirror in our bedroom wearing a simple but elegant midnight blue dress I'd bought with my own savings. It wasn't designer. It didn't have a label anyone would whisper about, but it fit me well, hugging my curves without being vulgar, and when I twirled, the skirt floated around my legs like a soft wave. You look perfect, Ethan murmured, coming up behind me and wrapping his arms around my waist. Not to plain? I asked, glancing at our reflection. Your mother's friends will be in custom couture. Let them be, he said. I like you just like this. You don't need diamonds to outshine them. My chest warmed. Ready? He asked. I nodded. I had no idea. I was getting dressed for my own public execution. The Hargrove estate had never looked more extravagant. Crystal chandeliers dripped from the ceiling. Fresh flowers in towering arrangements perfumed the air. A live band played soft jazz in the corner. Waiters moved through the crowd, carrying trays of champagne and expensive canapes. There were at least 200 people there. Politicians, CEOs, influencers, society darlings, everyone who mattered in their world, and all of them looked at me like I was an exhibit. That's her. I heard someone whisper as we walked in. The scholarship girl. Didn't they say she worked in some diner? Poor thing. She's pretty, but you can tell she's not one of us. Victoria glided toward us in a floor-length silver gown, lips painted in a perfect red. eyes already glittering with champagne and something darker. "Ethan," she cooed, kissing his cheek. "You look handsome, darling Mom." He smiled. "You look beautiful." Then her gaze shifted to me. Her smile cooled. "Lena, oh, you came. That dress is simple." I forced my lips into something resembling a smile. "Thank you for inviting me." "My dear, it's your anniversary," she said, voice dripping with sugar. "Of course, you had to be here." She didn't say wanted. She said had. Chloe appeared behind her, stunning in a gold gown that sparkled under the lights. She linked her arm through Victoria's and gave me a once-over blue. She said thoughtfully, "Bold choice. It's always so risky when cheaper fabrics try to imitate luxury, isn't it, Mother?" A few women nearby laughed softly. Heat crawled up my neck, but I bit my tongue so hard I could taste blood. Ethan squeezed my hand once. "It's going to be okay," he whispered. I nodded. I lied to myself again. Hours later, the party was in full swing when it happened. The band finished a song. The crowd murmured, "Glasses, clinked." Victoria took the microphone from the lead singer, smiling as if she were the queen of some kingdom and this was her coronation. "Good evening, everyone," she said, her voice carrying easily through the speakers. "Thank you all for joining us as we celebrate 2 years of marriage for our dear Ethan and his wife Lena." The way she paused before wife, the way she almost tripped over my name, it was subtle, but I felt 200 eyes slide toward me again. I swallowed, forcing a smile. Victoria continued, "Family is everything. Loyalty, trust, honesty. These are the values we uphold in this house." She placed a hand on her chest theatrically, and it is with a heavy heart that I must address something that happened tonight. A murmur rippled through the crowd. My hands went cold. Victoria's fingers flew to her throat, eyes wide with practiced distress. "My emerald necklace," she gasped, "were the one Charles gifted me on our 20th anniversary. It's gone." Gasps echoed through the room. I frowned. I'd seen her wearing it earlier. Huge emeralds surrounded by diamonds, resting against her collarbone like a glittering line of warning. It was impossible to miss. Now her neck was bare. "I had it on an hour ago," she said, voice trembling. I went upstairs to freshen up, and when I came back, it was gone from my jewelry case. A chill skated down my spine. I already knew, somehow, where this was going. "I don't want to believe it," she whispered, eyes scanning the crowd. Then her gaze locked on mine. "But there is only one person who was in my room while my jewelry was unattended." 200 heads turned. Room narrowed around me. "Lena," she said my name like a sentence. "You were in my dressing room, weren't you?" My mouth went dry. "I was looking for the bathroom," I stammered. "I got turned around." "I never touched you." "She was alone," Chloe cut in, stepping to her mother's side like they'd choreographed this whole thing. "I saw her near the dresser." She looked nervous. "This is absurd," I said, my voice shaking. "Why would I steal from you? Why wouldn't you?" Victoria snapped, her polished mask slipping just enough for everyone to see the contempt underneath. "A girl like you, no family, no background, suddenly married into one of the wealthiest families in the state. You think we don't know why you're here?" "Victoria," Ethan said, finally finding his voice. "Mom, stop, be quiet." "Ethan." Charles' voice cut through the noise like a blade. He stepped forward, jaw tight. "If she's innocent, she won't mind a search." "A search?" I repeated, disbelief turning to fear. "You can't be serious. I didn't take anything." "If you have nothing to hide," Victoria said coldly, "you won't mind proving it, unless there's a reason you don't want to be checked." Phones were out now. People were recording, whispering, hungry for scandal. Tears stung my eyes. "Please," I said, looking at Ethan, "tell them I wouldn't do this. Tell them." He looked at me, then at his parents, then at the crowd, then at the crowd. His mouth opened, then closed. Silence. He said nothing. A crack split through my chest. "Security," Charles barked. 2 men in dark suits moved closer. "Make sure she isn't hiding anything here." Now my heart pounded so loudly I could barely hear anything else. "You are not touching me," I said, backing away, panic clawing at my throat. "This is insane. I didn't steal anything." "Then prove it," Victoria hissed. She reached for me, her hand fisted in the neckline of my dress, and in that moment, right as I felt the fabric strain under her grip, right as 200 people leaned forward, eyes gleaming, phones raised, I knew one thing with absolute clarity. They thought I was powerless. They thought they were about to strip me of the only dignity I had left. They had no idea that my father had warned me, that somewhere out there, a man with more power than all of them combined would burn their world down brick by brick for laying a hand on me. I was still frozen, still shaking, still human and breakable and terrified. But somewhere, under all that, a small, fierce voice whispered, "Call him." And the moment they ripped my dress open and my world shattered under 100 camera flashes, I knew exactly what I was going to do. Victoria's nails dug into my skin as she yanked the front of my dress. The fabric tore with a sickening sound loud enough for the whole ballroom to hear. Gasps. Phones rising higher, people pushing forward for a better angle. I clutched the shredded fabric desperately to my chest, but Chloe grabbed my arms from behind. "Hold still," she hissed. "You brought this on yourself." "No, stop please," I screamed, trying to twist away. but they didn't care. They didn't hear me. They didn't want to hear me. Victoria pulled again, this time with both hands, and the seam split open from shoulder to waist. My breath caught. The room swayed. Heat flushed my cheeks. I felt exposed, violated, humiliated in a way I had never imagined possible. Someone laughed. Someone whispered, "Record this, so my God." My knees buckled. ENOUGH. Ethan shouted finally, stepping forward. For one hopeful second, I thought he was going to protect me. Then his voice lowered. "Mom, just finish checking so we can end this." My heart broke. My husband wasn't stopping them. He was helping them. Victoria dropped the torn fabric and stepped back, satisfaction gleaming in her eyes. "Nothing inside her dress," she announced proudly, "but she could be hiding it anywhere." "Shoes," Charles barked. "Check her shoes." The guards moved in. I wrapped my arms around myself, shivering under the cold chandelier light, barely dressed, barely breathing. "Don't touch me," I whispered. One guard hesitated. The other did in single quotes. He reached for me, and that THAT was the moment something inside me died. Not because of the humiliation, not because of the accusations, not because of the dress lying in tatters at my feet, but because when I looked at Ethan, my husband, my partner, the man I loved, he looked away. That was the second everything became clear. They never saw me as family. I was disposable, replaceable, an inconvenience they were finally eliminating. My voice shook as I whispered, "I need a phone." A valet boy, bless his brave heart, stepped forward immediately and pressed his phone into my trembling hands. "Here," he said softly, "use mine." My fingers shook so badly I almost dropped it. Dad's number was burned into my memory. He answered on the first ring. "Dad," my voice cracked. "Dad, I need you." Silence. "Then where are you?" "The Hargrove estate," I sobbed. They tore my dress. They accused me. They're searching me. They're searching my dad." His voice changed instantly. Cold. A quiet fury I had only heard once before in my life. "Nina." "Yes," I choked. "Do not move. A beat. I'm coming." The line went dead. I stood there shaking in the ripped remains of my dress as the Hargroves circled me like hyenas, clueless about what was coming. It took him exactly 14 minutes until the night tore open, until the earth beneath the Hargroves cracked. Until every person in that ballroom learned who they had just destroyed. Victoria was mid-sentence. Search her hair. She might have pinned it there when the ground outside began to rumble. A roar filled the ballroom, then bright white light flooded through the windows. Engines. Dozens. People rushed to the glass. "Oh my God, what is that? Is that?" I stepped forward, clutching the valet's jacket around me as a fleet of glossy black SUVs rolled up the driveway like a private military convoy. Then a helicopter descended above the lawn, its spotlight blinding. The party froze. The front doors flew open, and my father walked in. Richard Hale, a man every billionaire feared, every CEO knew, every politician respected. Silver hair, black suit, steel eyes, a presence that silenced an entire ballroom instantly. Behind him were 20 private security officers in tactical suits, 6 lawyers, 2 detectives, and the chief of police. The crowd parted, like the Red Sea. My father walked straight toward me, without pausing. His eyes took in my torn dress, my shaking body. My bare shoulders, the silent tears streaking my cheeks, and something in his face, something lethal, ignited. He took off his coat and wrapped it around me gently, as if I was made of glass. "Are you hurt?" he asked, voice steady. "No," I whispered, just broken." He cupped my cheek. "Not anymore." Then he turned, and the softness vanished. His voice was thunder. "Who laid a hand on my daughter?" Gasps, whispers. Someone dropped a champagne glass. Victoria blanched. Charles' jaw fell open. Chloe stumbled back. Ethan went pale. No one answered him, so he repeated, louder, fiercer. I asked a question. His voice cut through the air like a blade. "Who touched her?" The room was silent. A deadly, terrified silence, until Ethan finally stepped forward and croaked, "She's your daughter." My father's expression darkened. "You didn't know." The venom in his voice could melt steel. "Of course you didn't, because she didn't need my money to validate her existence." Victoria sputtered. Mr. Hale, Richard Hale, the billionaire." Yes," he said coldly. "And you touched the only person in the world who matters to me." He turned sharply. "Lucas," he called. His head of security stepped forward. "Sir." "Show them." The lawyers moved. Instantly, screens flickered on, cameras switched, and suddenly the ballroom was filled with security. Footage from the estates, hallways, footage from Victoria's dressing room, footage only my father's people could have planted weeks ago, footage that showed Chloe walking into her mother's room and taking the emerald necklace, footage that showed Victoria instructing her to hide it in the guest bathroom vent, footage that showed both women rehearsing their accusation against me. And the audio, crystal clear. Victoria's voice echoed through the speakers. "Once we expose her, Ethan will see what she really is. He'll divorce her, and we'll get rid of this nobody for good." Gasps, hands covering mouths, phones capturing everything. Some people were crying from pure secondhand shame. Victoria collapsed. Chloe sobbed. Charles staggered backward like someone had punched him. My father wasn't done. "Oh, and Charles," he said, The screen switched again. Now it displayed financial documents, emails, fraudulent transfers, illegal tax reports, all connected to the Hargrove business empire. Charles' face turned ashen. You embezzled company funds, my father said calmly. You laundered money, you siphoned your investors' assets, and you used company funds to host private parties like this one. No, Richard, please let's talk about this man to man, sir, a detective interrupted. We've confirmed the evidence. It's enough for 20 years. 20, my father said. I think the maximum is 30. Charles collapsed into a chair. My father wasn't done. He looked at Victoria. You humiliated my daughter. His voice iced over. So now I will humiliate you. The screen switched again. This time it showed the Hargrove estate ownership. The crowd went silent. 5 months ago, my father said I bought the mortgage to this house. The Hargrove estate is now Hele property. Victoria screamed. Your business, he continued, turning to Charles. Hale Dominion Group quietly acquired 72% of its shares. You, Charles, now work for me. The room erupted. People gasped, shouted, whispered, but my father silenced them with one simple sentence. You all watched them strip my daughter. Now watch them lose everything. Victoria sobbed. Chloe fainted. Charles looked dead inside. Ethan stumbled toward me. Lena, baby, didn't know I froze. Please don't leave me. I looked at him. Really looked at him. The man who stayed silent while his family destroyed me. It doesn't matter if you froze. I whispered. You let me drown, please. He begged. I love you. No, I said softly. You love comfort. You love convenience. You love obedience. And I refuse to shrink for you ever again. Lena, I'm done. My father handed me a pen. One of the lawyers opened a folder. Divorce papers. I signed them without hesitation. Ethan collapsed to his knees. Please, he whispered, voice raw. Please don't go. But I already had. 6 months later, Hargroves were finished. Charles was in prison. Victoria worked the front counter at a low-end boutique. Chloe lived in a rented room downtown. Their friends abandoned them instantly, but I became Lena Hale again. I stepped into the company as vice president. I spearheaded a foundation for women in abusive relationships. I bought my own penthouse with my first-year salary. I traveled, I healed, and I flourished. One night, during a charity gala for my foundation, I recognized the woman at the coat check. Victoria. She looked older, smaller, human. Bubble quotes Lena. She whispered, tears forming. I'm sorry for everything. I know I don't deserve forgiveness, but I am truly, deeply sorry. I stared at her for a long moment. Then I said softly, I forgive you. Her breath hitched. But, I added gently, forgiveness doesn't erase consequences, and it doesn't open doors that were closed for a reason. She nodded slowly. I understand. She returned to a small station, and I turned back to my life, a life they could never touch again. My father found me minutes later. Proud of you, he murmured. I learned from the best. I replied. He pulled me into a warm, safe embrace, and in that moment, surrounded by women whose lives were changing because of the foundation I built, I knew the real revenge wasn't destroying the Hargroves. The real revenge was becoming a woman they could never break. A woman who rose, anyway, a woman who needed no one's approval, a woman who remembered her worth. I am Lena Haley. I am my father's daughter, and I will never let anyone strip me of my dignity, my identity, or my power ever again.